Hi and welcome to another Huddle Breakdown Extra Time. I'm your host Martin Murphy and I'm joined by James and by Alan. Alan, great to have you back this week, my friend. You were sadly missed. We did our best, but wonderful to have you back.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's obviously very good to be back. I'd rather be here than where I was, but yeah, good to be back and looking forward to crack on. It's been a satisfactory week, I think, for Celtic.
Hasn't it just? And I think today's date, shouldn't go without mention as well. Obviously, 31st of October. That's liquidation day, folks, isn't it? Yes, 2012. Liquidation day, 31st of October. And it was actually alluded to last night. Obviously, we're recording on the 31st. It was alluded to last night by the Rangers manager, Mr. Clement, where he was telling his disgruntled fans, well, it could be a lot worse, folks. It could be 12 years ago. Then you really would have something to worry about. So bless him for reminding
Well,
reminding
on the
them
back of
that.
on the back of their annual report and accounts being published, he had an absolutely valid point.
I actually think he's potentially trolling them at the moment, just seeing what he needs to do before they've got to pay him off and move him on. Bless him. I enjoyed his interview after the Aberdeen Rangers match as well. But we're here for Celtic, of course. And I was at the match last night against Dundee. I haven't actually had time to watch highlights or so forth. We got back quite late last night, and then I was intrigued to watch what had happened at Pittodrie, I have to say. So kind of looking forward to getting your views on the game. Tell me what my lying eyes have deceived me about through the power of numbers. But there was a few things that I guess struck me a little bit. Seemed a pretty routine victory in a lot of ways. Good to have a game where we didn't have to exert ourselves too much with the big game against Aberdeen coming up. And we will be joined later in the show by Gavin MacPhee, of course. Your regular viewers and listeners will recognise Gavin. Now, he was here a couple of weeks ago. He's an Aberdeen fan and analyst as well. So we'll look forward to that section of the show. But I felt that was good, and we played a few genuinely fringe players, and we were able to rest people like Carter Vickers as the game went on. I suppose from my point of view, watching the game, happy with the result. Always good to get a victory. Nothing tremendously exciting. A few things I was happy about, but I thought the fringe players that came in, I wasn't overly impressed with Palmer. I wasn't overly impressed with Yang. Happy for Yang that he managed to have a hand in the opening goal through Alistair Johnson. He set that up, albeit it was deflected. Palmer, I thought, flattered to deceive, especially early on, looked very busy, and I didn't think there was an awful lot of quality crosses coming in during the game, and it saw both players being substituted later on, although of course we know Rodgers tends to do that in any case as the game progresses. I thought Ralston started pretty well, put a few good balls into the box. Just prior to him being substituted, I felt he was becoming quite slack with his passing and his crossing. Obviously, he hasn't played that many games recently, but overall, quite happy. But I'd be really interested to know what you guys thought about the kind of fringe players, first of all, more than anything. And if I could come to you first, please, Alan.
Yeah, listen, I think you've got to be satisfied. I know
Yeah,
it wasn't always a particularly pretty watch, and I think the disjointedness that comes from making six changes, it
sure.
doesn't matter how good a side you are, right? Even if, Madrid or Man City made six changes, you wouldn't get the same cohesion, right? These are not machines. So, there was that element to it. Dundee were, I thought, in their 5-4-1, obviously set up to frustrate. I thought they worked tremendously hard off the ball, especially in their own half and closing down the space. So all that gets kind of added to the mix. We're in between what was a really tough shift, obviously in Bergamo, away game
Yeah.
at Fir Park. 10 changes over the last two games, but really, when you look at it, at the end of it, you should Rogers should be satisfied because he's given a load of players game time. There's only Schmeichel and Trusty that have completed 90 minutes in all those last three games that I've mentioned. There's no one else that's completed 90 minutes in those games. So there's a load of players that have got minutes in there under the belt. Taylor got a full 90 minutes. Carter Vickers, he'd missed the last 4 games. Carter Vickers got 76 minutes under his belt. So, Ralston got nearly an hour. Palmer got nearly an hour. Yang got got an hour, etc. And then he's been able to in the last two games rotate off some of the, Engels, Bernardo, McCowan have all kind of rotated, and Hatate have all kind of rotated, and probably if you added it all up, had the same number of minutes, and much less than 90 sort of thing. So I think in that respect, it's all good, and it was actually one of those games which was incredibly efficient. I mean, even taking away the penalty, Celtic generated about 3.5 xg, and they
Hmm.
and they generated like less than point 0.2, right? So disjointed team. Clearly, there was some of the, and you mentioned the wide players, I think rightly struggling, not really adding a lot to the attack, and yet this was an overwhelming performance by Celtic in terms of the numbers. I mean, if you look at those numbers, this could easily, this is a profile of a 6-7-0 game, right? You know, the chances that Kyogo missed in the first moments of the game, the first early on, first 10, 15 minutes, were beggared belief. I mean, those two chances go in, you're probably looking at a blowout here. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything to be concerned about in terms of the overall underlying performance of the team. But what I think, and you asked me to talk about the people that came in, but what it just really does highlight rather starkly are some of the risks that we have, right? Kyogo is getting buffeted about. If he gets injured, what do we do? The wide areas is to me a massive concern in terms of the drop off in quality between
That was my main
Nicholas
concern, really, Alan. Absolutely.
between Nicholas Kuhn and everybody else. And I
Yeah.
include Maida in that from a creative perspective and from a goal threat perspective. I don't, Maida goes back up a notch when you add in all of his off ball stuff, absolutely. But in terms of, I'm talking about goal threat, creativity, etc., it's such a drop off. And then we're into the stage now where I don't think Rodgers really knows what his best three is in midfield. I really don't think he does. Because if I were to look at the last three games and pick a midfield purely on form, I'd have Luke McGowan in there, right? And then who plays with him? And you kind of scratching your head. And as I say, the pattern, and I've not captured the data myself, so I don't have all the packing data from last night. But the thing that concerned me enormously from the Atalanta game, which is kind of understandable, don't have a lot of the ball, etc. But even the Motherwell game was almost the complete absence of any passing from the central midfield. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
like 1, 2, 3 passes each, and that's even with Hatate, right? So even with Hatate, who's the more progressive passer of them all. So I just think we've got a potential nightmare in terms of finding that perfect kind of. If I don't say there is a perfect, but that optimal, let's say, kind of midfield three at the moment. We don't know how long McGregor's out as well. Bernardo's audition as a number six, I don't think has gone really well, if I'm honest with you. Engels
No
looked
bueno,
quite solid
Alan.
in
No
there.
bueno.
Hmm? Yeah, Engels looked quite solid in that role. But to me, the only one that's showing any, you know, sort of O'Reilly-esque ability to break lines and take defenders out of the game is McCowan. And at this stage, I would actually be playing him on Sunday as in terms of
I
the
think
sort
I
of
think
fringe
he's cup
players.
tied, isn't he? He
Oh yeah, he
played for
might be.
Dundee. He'll be cup tied at the weekend.
Good spot. So that's a real loss. And then what do you do with Trusty? I think Trusty's been outstanding. He was excellent in Bergamo.
Really
Does
good.
he get dropped for a sort of creaky Carter Vickers? I don't know. So yeah, overall really happy, content. probably went exactly how Rodgers wanted it to go from an overall squad management outcome perspective. But there's a few little niggles emerging around the squad that, as the games ratchet up and come thick and fast, could become issues.
Right. Just before I come to you, James, couple of things to pick up a little bit on there, I suppose. I think the disappointment for me with Kyogo's finishing early on was they're the sort of games where you want to get ahead and take him off and rest him and wrap him, gently, in cotton wool for the weekend. And I mean, he had a couple of chances early on. They were at the far end from where I was sitting, but the second one I couldn't believe, just how wide
They were great
he
chances.
put it.
They
It was
they were great
incredible.
chances. Yeah,
Although, to his credit, because he's that type of guy, he kept coming back for more. And when you look at that, the penalty incident, where Engels was superb. He won the ball, drove forward, a lovely pass through the lines, and Kyogo got onto it before getting pulled down. So fair play to him from that point of view. But yeah, that was a little bit of a disappointment. Those are the sort of games when you've got a big match coming up that you want to look after him. Because as you say, Alan, there was that moment again when he went down. And you could see him holding the shoulder and been a bit of discomfort. And at the full time whistle as well, he looked a bit uncomfortable. And you think, oh no. And, you've got the semi-final coming up. You've got Leipzig coming up before we've got the opportunity of having a little bit of a break. James, to pick up, a couple of Alan's points there, really. I wondered what your opinion is for both the central defence and the midfield. What would your preference be for the Aberdeen match?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what's the functional level for Carter Vickers, because I think the challenge that we have, I think Trusty's pace is a priority to include him because of and we'll get, I'm sure we'll get into it a lot more with Gavin, but the amount that Aberdeen's able to sit in and counter with pace wide, or even through the middle with Sockler, and now with McGrath playing as a 10
Yeah.
recently and hitting those through balls like he did against us a couple of weeks ago. So, if they suck in a Carter Vickers with a toe problem, who's, probably not 100% is my guess. And even if he's coming back from it, it's probably not pain free or, completely healed, would be my guess. So, and, Scales pace not being his strong suit, although I think he's okay in that regard, but he's not, he's not on par with Trusty. So I think that would be good. So whether that means Trusty supplants Scales or supplants Carter Vickers, to me is okay. What percentage is Carter Vickers at? Is Carter Vickers at 80%, 85%? Conceptually, not that these numbers even mean anything, but you get what I'm
Yeah.
suggesting. So I think that's the biggest factor. I mean, personally, I think Trusty plays. The question is Carter Vickers fit enough that it's Carter Vickers Trusty or Trusty and Scales? But yeah, so that to me is the biggest issue. As far as the overall performance goes, I'll echo everything Alan said. I mean, it's yesterday, or I should say, Wednesday's game against Dundee was in stark contrast to the Motherwell game, where the Motherwell game was basically, get it over with. Let's get the hell out of here. We're happy with the 2-0.
Yeah.
This was a clear, dominant, the score line could have been way different than it was. And a little bit of defensive Kyogo. Again, I agree. Like he definitely, a couple of them could have been much better finishes, but the one he also had a really good save against them with
Yeah.
McCracken. I was saying that in the pub yesterday. McCracken with my horrible
you,
fake
judging
Glaswegian accent.
judging by your tweets, you'd had a few, hadn't you?
Oh, I had a few. Yeah. I got there an hour and a half before the game. God help me. So
Surprised you didn't spend the game in the toilet then. Your old man bladder
yeah,
and
no,
all that.
hey, a prostate of steel,
Were you
Alan, a
practicing
prostate of
your
steel.
poetry at all?
No, I was working on my kegels, so I didn't have to go to the bathroom all the time. My kegel exercises, but yeah. So McCracken actually is an interesting player because he's young. He's like 24. Started as the number one keeper for them. Was dreadful. They brought Carson in, who was also dreadful, and now they brought McCracken back, and he actually had a pretty good game for, you know, I thought he was the primary factor in first half squeaky bum time, right? It was like we're
Yeah.
I even put it in the Substack chat from the pub. I clipped the first half stats, and it was like, holy, like WTF, like when are we going to score here? This is, this should be a comfortable blowout type of game, and it's been an annoying first half type of thing. So yeah, to me that was, it was one of those games where the keeper was playing pretty well. Our finishing was off a little bit, but it wasn't really worrisome. It was one of those games where you're, worst case, yeah, we'll get the goal to win 1-0, but more likely, get at least a couple in the second half. That's kind of how I felt about it. Fortunately, that's how it played out. So yeah, this goes more into the different column in a season where dominant scoreline should have been better. But not in the grand scheme of things, a very, very, very comfortable game.
Thinking about the defence, and I'll throw it open to you both, really, because I suppose the other guy coming back was Taylor, and I do like Taylor. I thought he seemed a bit rusty as well, and Baye's done pretty well. With this big game coming up, do you think Rodgers will go with the experience of Taylor? Do you think he'll stick with Baye because he's been playing more regularly? That's to either of you.
I think that's one of the fascinating questions. We have some interesting questions going into this game for a change, and some of them are good, meaning that I think Valle competing to the point where we have to ask that question is good, meaning that we have some depth, some authentic depth at left back. We've been crying for it for how long now? So that's a good problem to have. I would probably, and I don't have a strong conviction on this, but I would tilt towards Valle just because he's fitter probably. And, to your point, Taylor was out a little while here. So the idea that he's just going to kind of blast off into what could be a pretty competitive semifinal against a very, high performing, well coached team in Aberdeen right now, with that dreaded word that I usually refrain from, momentum. And so yeah, I my sense would be Valle, but I think it'll be interesting to see how Rodgers thinks about it, and whether he goes to the tried and tested. And I could get some loyalty with a guy like Taylor, that you want to give him the benefit of the doubt if he says he's 100%, and the numbers, the tracking data and his pace and all that stuff suggests that he is actually functioning at 100%. So yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting selection questions that'll get answered.
Sorry, just before I come to you, Alan, it's worth also considering, the result that we had in Italy, with Baye playing at left back, without Carter Vickers playing in central defence. At least we're in a position now where we feel we can rely on these guys coming in, where not so long ago having Taylor out, having Carter Vickers out would have been, a real concern. And when you look at the results that have happened recently, Atalanta won 6-1 and then 2-0. They're still top goal scorers in Serie A. And Motherwell getting a good result away at Tannadice as well in midweek, so we've managed to mix and match a little bit. We've kept results going. We've had comfortable wins. And these teams are no mugs. That's Motherwell up to fourth. Alan, what's your thoughts on who should maybe start in defence, in your opinion?
So I'm going to hope that Rodgers develops a sort of rational streak. And what I mean by that is I would go with the players that we know are fit and are in form. And that probably means, a back four of Johnson, Trusty, Scales, and Bailly. I think it's great that Carter Vickers and Taylor have got minutes under the belt. It would be great to have them on the bench. I think that would probably in itself send a message and probably deflate Aberdeen side to see those players that are ready to come on if needed. If McGregor's not fully fit, and he's obviously didn't get any minutes at all, as I say, the last two games, then don't play him. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't chuck him in.
But he never
We need.
loses at Hampden. I'm really superstitious, Alan.
Well, if he doesn't play, then he'll keep that
Bring him on
record.
the last minute.
But I think that does provide a problem because I'm not really sure who then sits, and I think I would be almost tempted. I'd be almost tempted, and I know Rogers doesn't really do this, and Celtic don't really do this, to have a little tweak for this game tactically. In that, I mean, actually, to me, in my mind, it's crying out for Iwata to say, right, you sit on McGrath. That's your job for the day. Because if you do that, you're going to take away a huge proportion of their attacking threat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're set up really smart, but they are hugely reliant on McGrath in terms of playing quick, and it's the speed of the passing, as we'll hear from Gavin. It's the speed of the passing that's really important. So if you sit on him and get to him, don't let him turn, don't let him face up. Because at the end of the day, he's a good player, but he's not like, we're not talking about a sort of, Modric here. Do you know what I mean? It's so if you can stop him, so who's going to do that role? Who's going to sit? Bernardo. You can't just discard the idea of Bernardo being a six, right? But it's going to be a wee bit of a risk based on his performances to sling him in as a six in that semi final. So that's the conundrum for me. I would have the back four as it was in Bergamo. The front three, Maeda, Kyogo, Kun, they take care of themselves, and it's just really what that composition is in midfield that I'm not entirely sure what exactly we'll do. But what I would say is I wouldn't risk McGregor. If he's not fit, let's get 11 lads out there that we know are 100% because we can't take chances with this one.
I still have memories of that 3-3 draw at Ibrox when McGregor came on and he clearly wasn't fit. And it cost us, so that's very much in my mind. And I'm really in agreement with you both about going with the players that I feel have probably earned the manager's trust now through their performances in the last few weeks that are fit and have been playing. We are playing some really tough games, and that does allow us to ease in McGregor, ease in Taylor, ease in Carter Vickers. Although I do feel a tremendous reassurance when Carter Vickers is playing with his positional playing, just as his sense of calm and leadership. I would be tempted, much as I've admired Scales this season, probably to go with Trusty because I've been really impressed by him, especially in the game in Italy. And since then, I think that's really helped his confidence and he's really grown in stature. So I'd probably go down that route. Guys, have you any other thoughts on the match against Dundee before we move on to Gavin?
No, the only other observation I had was to Alan's point on McCowan and the continued concern about creativity coming out of the midfield.
Yeah.
Not only final third creativity, but ball progression and the speed with which we're transitioning from back to forward. And while this was an overwhelmingly dominant game, ultimately, that, as Alan suggested, there was still some issues there. And I continue to worry that that's going to sustain and persist. And if McGregor's out, that going up against a higher quality opponent like Aberdeen, for example, or this is going to be a quick turnaround. I mean, Tuesday against Leipzig, that comes awful fast after the game Saturday. So yeah, that would be my only, because despite our kind of really high XG numbers, it was those couple of chances early against Kyogo, and then it was kind of a slog from open play. And again, we keep doing a really good. Engels is a good set piece deliverer. He's good with dead balls, and so that I think we're going to have better weaponry from set pieces as a result of that. But kind of average chance quality and the composition of the distribution of what we're creating from open play, I think, is still a concern out of midfield. So Dundee kind of continues in that direction, even though it was an overwhelmingly dominant game.
Now it's time to go on to Gavin MacPhee, as we alluded to earlier at the start of the show. Gavin, a warm welcome back to us. Your last appearance went down really well. I hope the result isn't as successful for you as in the previous occasion when we come up to the weekend. But a warm welcome to the Huddle Breakdown Extra Time.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Thanks very much for coming back, Gavin. Gavin, so we're talking in the aftermath of a very dramatic midweek and a great result for Aberdeen against the Rangers. Although I have to say, from what I can gather listening to Philip Clement, you seem to have been a bit fortunate from what I made out of this. If only McCausland had cut his toenails, it could have been a draw. And then there was the chance right at the end. And you seemed under tremendous pressure, according to the Rangers manager, who, as we know, is a man of great dignity and reason. What were your thoughts on the match?
Well, I mean, absolutely incredibly lucky to hang on there. If only I think Mr. Clement took the advice of Mr. Thielen and stayed humble, we might have he might be in a bit better of a situation. But all seriousness, if we just even look at the data, Aberdeen came out on top in a number of metrics, both in terms of those kind of things, but certainly on the field, I thought they were deserved winners.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. He'll no doubt point to things like possession and so forth, but I think you were quite happy for them to have possession across their back line and all the rest of it. It wasn't anywhere that was looking as if it was going to hurt you. I guess in terms of the match last night, a very different approach from Aberdeen at home with a crowd behind them compared to the game at Celtic Park. What did you feel that the strengths were last night? I mean, as an outsider, the kind of outstanding things for me from an Aberdeen point of view seem to be, again, Devlin, your full-back / attacking midfielder. What a performance up and down the pitch. And as you mentioned, and I'll mention it again on AFC 1903, if you want to find any information in Gavin's output, really, really interesting. Gavin had made the point about how many goals and what an attacking threat, how many goals had come from Devlin either scoring or being involved in the build-up play. The other one that I thought, again, had a good match was McGrath, apart from, obviously, we found out he can't hit a penalty. But, some superb play again. Defensively looked the part right across the centre-backs. And, I mean, it was a terrific performance overall. But where did you feel the game was won for Aberdeen in particular?
Yeah, I think so. Probably the biggest change since we've played, or even potentially since the first half against Celtic, is McGrath's moved into the middle, and he's played there the last two games. And it just seems to me that we've started to kind of skip the midfield a little bit when we build out. So we've still been kind of going short, but we've been kind of playing a few more kind of longer balls, kind of. And against Dundee United, it kind of, that was more in the kind of final third a little bit, but still at the back. It didn't really quite come off. And then the second half there was a game of kind of, attack versus defence, really. But last night you saw that, like, Rubezic replayed to Devlin, and there was, Sockler. They were hitting Sockler a bit more often. And then we had runners off of that. So I think, we didn't turn the ball over in midfield all that often. And we look to play forward, and it's kind of what we're getting more to this kind of, quote unquote, Thielen ball. I think now, like, we were starting to see quicker transitions. We were getting the ball into McGrath. He's just turning, and he's in the centre. He's playing those balls through quickly, and we're getting bodies in the box. And I think it wasn't so much. When we had the ball, it was just these quicker kind of movements to get in behind and get forward and get people in there. And I think we created more chances in this game than we have in a lot of other ones. Off the ball, similar kind of setup to what we did against you guys, the kind of 4-4-2. And where the difference is there's just a lot less rotation in their midfield and their fullbacks. In the first half, the ball went out to Tavernier consistently, and he kind of played long balls, right
Yeah.
down the throat of either Mitov or Malloy. Second half, they put on Sterling, and they kind of seem to have a little bit more variation, and they drop back into a kind of back three more consistently. And even when I was watching the game, it felt like they were really turning the screw, and no doubt they did have a period in that second half, but it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was when I watched it back. We still had a few breaks. Morris came on, gave us an outlet again. And I think after their goal actually comes from an attacking transition on our end, um, and then obviously we get the winner. So I think where it came down from, I think we gave ourselves less situations to maybe get turned over in midfield. I mean, some of this comes down to their poor decision making and poor play compared to what you guys do, and just kind of those other elements of just intensity and effort and teamwork, and I think everyone buying into the manager. Those maybe make the difference, and maybe
Yeah,
a little
just
bit of luck too.
sorry.
On you go.
No, I was just going to say, a kind of final thing from me, really, before I pass over to the guys. With Thielen, you mentioned Thielen ball there, which I love. I love that phrase. But I talked about this the last time you were on. How it really impressed me about his in-game management and the way that his substitutes seem to work pretty well
Yeah.
always, and he can change, and the players seem to be more used to changing formation during matches as well, not just from game to game, which was one of the questions that we were raising when you were on previously. He's shown he can do that, but in-game management as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's really got the trust of the whole squad. I mean, I just mentioned there before we went on here about Jimmy McGarry, and obviously we didn't see him, but there was a potential for him to come on instead of Jack McKenzie. Um, but Peter Ambrose scores the winner, on Saturday, and
Yeah.
he really did not, and I don't know if he's totally convinced anyone in it, but there's just a belief there that he's clearly installing in the players, and I think the fans are being a lot more patient with everyone because they're seeing improvements from everyone, and maybe it allows players more opportunity to make mistakes and take chances, and absolutely, and I think some of those changes, like these formations, they evolve so much when you have the ball, when you don't have the ball, how you play. I think I kind of in my review of Dundee United would seen this kind of where the attacking midfielder and the centre forward drop and the two wingers kind of go higher, and that was actually what we saw against you guys when Clarkson had these chance
Yep.
near right before half
Yeah.
time. But then when he brought on Duke and Sockler, it's almost like a kind of a one. McGrath drops in and you have the high three. So there's those kind of changes that are happening in terms of like the structure of the team and how we play a little bit, and the width maybe being higher versus narrower, and etc. But a lot more detail than probably I can understand as well. I'm sure it's going on.
Okay, thank you. James, if I could come to you first of all, if you'd like to ask Gavin any questions about Aberdeen.
Yeah, mine was going to follow up with what you just mentioned, Martin, which was the game management. And I saw I want to say the last 20 minutes, once our game was done, we were able to flip it over to your game at the pub I was at in Pittsburgh. And so I caught the rest of the game. And then I went back this morning and looked at the data. I mean, once you guys scored, it looked like you completely shut the game down. Meaning that you didn't have much of the ball, look like, but that my memory's a little fuzzy. I had a few pints in by then. But looking at the data, I mean, with them trying to chase an equalizer, they basically didn't get squat as far as really from a chance perspective. So did you assess that as a game management decision? Because that seems to be a pattern with Thielen, and we talked about this last time about part of the data profile of Aberdeen, and I even shared a graphic in our Substack about game state and how the XG differential that Aberdeen's had has actually been very good when the score line's even. And then they're almost conceding chances a little bit, but they're mostly not high quality chances once you get a lead. So did it kind of fit that that strategy once the second goal was scored?
I would actually. I mean, I would say so to some degree. In terms of, they had a wee. Tavernier had a header right at the death, what you probably could have done better with, but it wasn't quite the same as what we've seen against you guys, and maybe sometimes that's you guys forcing us back or whatever. But even like when we played Motherwell, we didn't really kind of camp the box. We had a bit more of the ball, and we were able to kind of have some outlets and get the ball kind of down the line. But yeah, I think we were able to sit in a little bit, but had a better opportunity to break. And maybe that's an evolution of the team a little bit from from where it was a couple of weeks back, and maybe it's a reflection of Rangers too. I think it's possible that they just run out of ideas as well.
Right,
Okay, Alan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did a piece actually. It's going to be on the Celtic way. Just looking forward to the game at the weekend, and I've obviously watched a fair bit now of Aberdeen over the last few weeks, and I think they're great fun. I really do, genuinely, the breath of fresh air, all of that. But it's what is fascinating to do is to look at the sort of data profile and then consider the reality of the actual matches. And normally, and especially as a lot of the way that a lot of Scottish teams play is quite predictable in terms of a lot of long ball, etc. A lot of sitting in deep without the ball. But Aberdeen seem to defy any analysis. That if you even if you were to take the data and watch the game, you would kind of struggle to put the two things together. So what do I mean by that is, so looking at StatsBomb data, and remember, as far as James is concerned, I think StatsBomb have got the most sophisticated XG model of all the vendors, right? I think if you look at XG4 and XG again, so XG differential, I think Aberdeen are plus 0.03, which is tiny, right? I mean, that's kind of mid-table XG
Right.
differential. And when I looked at their attacking profile and the defensive profile, and sort of thought, right, what is standing out here? What are the outliers here? There were only actually three outliers, and they were all defensive. One is they pretty much top the league in counter pressure regains. Now, what that flags to me is a very well organized team. So it's quality over quantity. It's a team that will press given the right triggers and do it very effectively. They don't necessarily press all the time because Aberdeen don't. I mean, they sit very, very deep. So that brings me to my second point. There's very few teams in the league that sit deeper than Aberdeen, actually. The defensive line is so deep. But again, I think of that as being, well, that's kind of intelligent. Neither of the centre backs have got really any pace, and the two holding midfielders don't have any pace. So it makes absolute sense to sit quite deep, and then you've got energy on the flanks and you've got energy up front. And then the other thing that stood out, and again, was essentially the goalkeeper, right? The goalkeeper
Yeah.
just stands out, right? So the three things, right? So they were the three things that you're looking at the sort of 95 plus percentile on StatsBomb compared to the rest of the league, and everything else really profiles like essentially a mid-table side. Now, this isn't me um, leading you towards aren't Aberdeen lucky narrative. That's not what I'm trying to do, because I recognise watching Aberdeen, there's an awful lot more going on here. And as James says, you almost have to break it down by game state to see some of the chance creation. And what I see is a cohesive, organised, well drilled team that responds flexibly to the way the game is going, and are quite happy to defend when they need to, which is quite a brave thing to do. But what I wanted you to do, so the preamble, that was a preamble really. For you're the expert here, is to try and recognizing or accepting that dichotomy between what does the data profile look like and what's the reality on the pitch. How would you articulate that in terms of what you see?
Oof. Well, I think one of the caveats I would maybe like to and I'm going to give you some homework here, Alan, is maybe look at like
That's fair.
how it's maybe evolved over the season, and are we getting like I would love to almost see like if like, because the last two games I was kind of making a joke of it there, but we've won both those games kind of just a simplistic on XG, right? against those last two games. So I'd love to see how this part. Obviously, I don't think we're going to win on Saturday, but it might be interesting to see how that carries on, and in terms of how this all fits within his long term development of the team, because I think that's an important thing too. It's not like I don't think it's a finished article as well, but
Yeah.
all that does make sense, and I think it is kind of this is why I really enjoy what I'm doing and like listening to you guys, is because a lot of these narratives come out that Aberdeen are an incredibly high pressing team, but they're not. I mean, like they'll do fits and spurts. There'll be parts of the game when they'll go for it. They did turn the dial a little bit, I think, in the second half against yourselves at Celtic Park, but then they'll drop back in, and I think there is an element of I think you're right with the game state. Like they'll push when they need to push, and if they see an opening, and they try and really maximize that window where they've got the team on the back foot. And it was like that last night. There was about a 15-minute period where, probably starting with McGrath's shot, which was blocked, which was a great chance right at the beginning, and then we had. I think there was a couple of attacks, and then we score, and then Shinnie hits the post, and then McGrath gets the penalty. So there was like a real period like that, and then start the second half. But I don't, again, whether it's by design or whether it's based on the intensity of the effort. He maybe, I don't know if he tells them, listen, next 10, 15, just sit in, make sure you don't concede anything, keep it tight. Maybe that's, where Shinnie and Nilsson come in. But I think I kind of had a wee section last night saying like the rhythms of the game. There's clear kind of rhythms that happen. And if you think back to the game we played against, yourselves, obviously, there was like, actually, when we went 2-0 down, there was like a 10-minute period again, might be Celtic doing it. We actually had more of the ball, possession wise. And then we have a good period at the start of the second half, but just not really a possession. It's more like a kind of counter press, and then we drop back in, and maybe we're knackered, partly. But so I guess what I'm probably trying to say is that it all probably does make sense given those factors. I think we'll just have to wait and see how it progresses from moving forward. I was really encouraged with Dundee United game because that was almost like a Celtic at home performance in the second half where we really kind of throttled the other team. Again, Jim Goodwin might be a factor there, but I'd really like to see how we start doing in those kind of games, moving forward.
Sorry, just on it seemed to me last night, and it wasn't necessarily clever game state, but the team seemed to get really spooked when McGrath missed that penalty. Like the crowd just collapsed, the energy just collapsed, and the players actually looked really like spooked, and it took them quite a while to. I don't know if you were at the game, but that's just what it seemed to me remotely. That, they kind of lost, their heads had gone fuzzy for 10 minutes.
No, I'm outside Boston, Alan, so it'd be a
Of
long
course,
trip for
sorry,
me.
yeah.
I wish I was there,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think they mentioned that on the radio, and probably halftime probably came at a good point, right? Because even though that Tonio, it was a tight offside as well, and I think that definitely could have changed the game.
I just wondered as well. So, sorry, James. I was just very quickly going to ask Gavin before I come back to you, if that's okay. Gavin, I wondered as you were talking there, maybe the lack of pace with the two holding midfielders, the likes of Shinnie. It was good for Aberdeen to maybe try and defend it and draw certain teams out a little bit, and then, as you alluded to earlier, the long balls using the pace up front to get in behind them. Do you think that's the way that Thielen's trying to play this?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that there. Can we win a ball back midfield? And as we said, McGrath's now playing more centrally.
Yes.
I think he's a quicker passer than Clarkson.
Sure.
And obviously you saw it with the goal at Parkhead, but he had another couple last night where he played a couple of boys in behind.
He had the one that almost resulted in, it looked to me initially, as if it was going to be a penalty kick. I think it was the Rangers centre back came across and just got a touch on the ball.
Right, exactly.
It was very similar to the goal that was scored at Celtic Park, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Sockler gives that kind of movement and pace in behind, even though he's not the best finisher in the world. He is more of an outlet. And if you add in Keskinen and Duke, you're now playing in behind more as opposed to kind of playing the feet. But yeah, definitely. And I think he was smart last night because Nilsson was on a booking and he put on Palaversa,
Yeah.
and you saw yourselves how Nilsson likes a kind of wee tactical foul. So that was a kind of a smart move, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, James.
you notice he got one tactical foul against them, and I think he managed to get 5 in at Celtic Park.
Are you trying to infer something, Alan?
Well, it's just if only it were a pattern.
Well,
Sorry,
Sorry,
well,
James.
sorry, James.
no,
James.
yeah. What I was going to say is part of the reason I've been bullish on Aberdeen having more of a sustainability to what's going on um, is an expectation that improvement was coming, meaning that even if some of these positive variance factors start to mean revert, um, that the underlying performance level ratcheting
Yeah,
up can absorb a good chunk of that. And I think that's what started to happen. So to your point, Gavin, what I've noticed is that kind of a rolling moving average of what's going on from an underlying performance basis is improving. And that's, I mean, Alan, you can correct me. I don't know what the stats bomb data was, but I mean, we're talking, you know, you hung pretty big numbers yesterday. I mean, that was a
Yeah,
positive positive XG differential from open play, better average chance quality, more shots. Like this was not um, a 50-50 game from a underlying performance perspective. This was a clear, solid outperformance by Aberdeen over Rangers. And I think that's a testament to this idea that, the improvement's coming. And,
yep,
as being able to play McGrath in the middle, who knows when, I forget, Gouye, is that his name? I can't pronounce it, but the guy who's
yeah.
out injured. Yeah, I mean, imagine when he's back. I mean, having depth at the number 10 position, having some depth out wide, and being able to
Yeah,
move these guys around. So yeah, I mean, I think even if some of the finishing mean reverts and opposition finishing isn't horrific going forward, I mean, I think you guys still have a lot to be positive about as these improvements continue, and kind of the upward arc continues. So I just want to throw that in there, that there is some
yeah.
evidence
Good
of what
call.
you're talking about.
So just because I was asked for that bit of homework, which I can do straight away. So the StatsBomb XG,
Nerd.
StatsBomb model in general, I know the StatsBomb model in general, I find is quite deflated compared to Opta and maybe Scout as well. But actually, it's gone mental on this game, absolutely mental on this game. So the XG was 2.75 to Aberdeen, which is terrific, and then 1.5 for them. So obviously the penalty kind of inflates it
Yeah,
clearly, but yeah,
Yeah, but
that
that's
was pretty.
still
That's
still
pretty.
almost two. And I think the other part. So this again, my understanding of the stats bomb model is their model is going to love McGrath, because their model quantifies through balls, and particularly when it results in 1v1 or just an attacker versus the keeper.
right.
It'll it skews to higher XG values because of those. So yeah, that's interesting, because that's kind of what I surmised by just looking at the Y Scout data. Um, so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call that a dominant performance, but I would call that a very solid underlying um, victory from an XG shagging perspective. So
Yeah, and
So
and I think
sorry, I'll just on that then
God,
quickly, and I'll shut up. So yeah, McGrath had the highest pass on ball value from StatsBomb, 0.43. But the highest in the game was Tavernier, 0.72, which just goes to show, as I keep saying, he is by miles their most creative player, and the quicker they chase him out the club, the better. Sorry, Gavin.
no. Yeah, I think, and I was just going to say, I think that's probably as good as we can maybe hope for in these kind of games. Given and obviously there's a difference between the two teams here, but um, I think for us to be winning those games by that margin on the kind of data side is pretty good as it gets. It's not just a kind of, I don't know, sit in and pick them off kind of Barry
Hmm.
Robson style. It is a kind of given what we said, the rhythms of the game, but pretty much going as much as we can toe to toe and doing it in a smart fashion.
a proper, smart counter-attacking team
Yep.
that, with 25 to 40% of possession, you're petrified of them. I
Yeah.
mean, that was
Yeah.
what I thought of his tenure at Elfsborg, and that's exactly what he's replicating. It looks like it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's directionally the way it's been going. So, yep.
You see, just all the conclusion I came to in my piece was just how smart everything is set up to minimise the weaknesses that are there, because there are clear weaknesses in the team. I mentioned the central midfield, etc. You're heavily reliant on McGrath, but then you've got this nice rotation of forward. Almost doesn't matter which two you put out there, three you put out there. You've got a nice rotation of forwards, keeps it fresh, keeps the energy going in the final third, and the fact that your defence sits really deep, almost really noticeably deep compared to other teams in the league. You actually, I think, have got one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the league in allowing what they call clear shots, which is a good thing, right? So it means that shots that aren't have bodies between the goal
Right.
and the player who's shooting, right? Aberdeen are perhaps the best in the league in that. And then behind all that, you've got arguably the best shot stopper in the league. So
Yeah.
actually also improving with his feet, I would say. I've noticed quite immeasurably. So listen, smart team set up really intelligently. So should we move forward
Yeah, I was
to
just about to say there.
semi
Actually,
final?
we'll move ahead, and it's a nice segue really into the semi-final at the weekend. Just before we do that, though, I'd just like to point out by the time I got home last night, traffic was dreadful getting back, but I sat very eagerly, knowing the result to watch it, and my only disappointment came at the end when the cameras from Sky focused on the celebrating Aberdeen players, where I did hope that they were going to focus on the Rangers players going over to their support to get their well-earned applause, backing up what their manager had said about how unfortunate they were. I did hear some boos in the background. I'm not sure where they came from, but I was rewarded by Chris Boyd and his interview afterwards. That was absolute gold dust. And do you know what? I'll probably watch it again tonight. That's the kind of guy I am. But on to the weekend. So Gavin, given everything that you've said in terms of how Aberdeen, approached the game last night, what the strengths have been over the season and so forth. How do you think Thielen will approach the semi-final against Celtic? Do you feel that he may go for the kind of way you did the second half against Celtic after you went 2 goals down? Do you think that will be more that sort of approach? And I also wondered if you felt that there would be much impact from the game, the midweek match as well, because that's really the first time Aberdeen's had a pretty significant match, and no doubt a few knocks. I think Duke picked up a bit of an injury as well.
Yeah, he came off. Yeah, I think, although I think he did say today that everyone's doing okay. So we'll see. But yeah, you're right. It's the first time we've played. I think not just from a kind of physical perspective, but also a kind of preparation standpoint. I think he's definitely the kind of coach where you want him to have as much time on the field as you can, and obviously and I do believe him when he says game to game. I certainly don't think he was thinking about the semi final before last night. I think so. They'll absolutely kind of probably start work on that, but they'll only be able to do a certain amount. And obviously we weren't able to rotate players the way
Yeah.
you guys were, so I think it will have an impact. It's a 90-minute game, potentially 120 minutes. I don't think we can sit in for the whole game and just hope to get away with it. Who knows? But I think even if you look at the last game, I as I said earlier, I think he will still try and kind of play, but it might be a little bit quicker getting it back to front. To avoid those potential kind of losing the ball high up the field, and even if it wasn't just we talked about it before, right? Whether he's an optimist or a pessimist, and he went to try and play. And if I was honestly, if I was being cynical, and I think Aberdeen had decent enough passing numbers in the first half compared to what we have had before, but it was almost like a Hibs performance, kind of like we're going to come here, we're going to play, but we're probably not quite good enough to do it. Whether it's from a technical perspective or a kind of rotation perspective, or those kind of things. So I think he'll probably try and kind of maybe, as I said to you before, maybe kind of, and I think it'll be the same team that starts the game as it did last night, which is also the same team that started the second half, I think, against. So probably Sockler, Duke, and Keskinen as the front three, and McGrath and Shinnie and Nielsen in behind. So
sorry, I was just going to say, I think the other factors that come into it, I suppose, that balance it a little bit for Aberdeen. We talked before about the belief, the confidence, and that's surging through every Aberdeen player. On top of that, you've come from 2 goals down at Celtic Park.
right.
Many of those players also played in the semi-final last season at Hampden, which was a close run thing as well. So I think that could potentially balance it out a little bit. And you've had a good look at Celtic, just as we've now had a good look at yourselves. So I think tactically it could be a really interesting match.
Yeah, I think you're right, absolutely, and I think that's the one thing you would say to them. Well, what happens if they go a couple of goals down? Well, they've done that. I mean, whether they can come back again, but at least you can't write them off. I think what I'm most worried about is we talked about Tavernier getting the ball in that slot last night, and I think you guys started to, I have to have another look back at it, but like your wide midfielders started to drop back in there. Your fullbacks were tucking in and pushing on, and obviously we've talked about Johnson scoring goals recently. That's what I'm most concerned about, is that you'll get the ball kind of around about the halfway line, maybe in a wide position, and then there'll be some kind of movement or rotation or pattern that you've worked on to try and get a man.
You won't be able to handle the Canadian Cafu, my friend, honestly.
I mean, he's right there with Devlin right now, isn't he, in the scoring charts?
They absolutely are, neck and neck.
Yeah, so I think, and listen, Roger's a smart coach. He's probably dealt with these things. I think he'll have worked on some things, and he'll be kind of confident. But hopefully, I'm hoping that maybe he kind of commits to that even more, doubles down, and maybe then we can hit you on the break even more. Or if I don't see him keeping. I mean, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't see him maybe tucking Johnson back in alongside the 2 centre halves if the ball's on the left hand side. He's going to go forward, right? And I think that's probably still our best chance of breaking you down.
Yeah, James, if I could come to you first of all, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I think heading into the prior matchup, we had a pretty set idea of selection on the Celtic side, with maybe a couple of mild questions. A lot less clarity going into this one from our perspective, because we assume certain people are back and ready to rock, like McGregor and Carter Vickers, but are they actually like top-notch match fit? Probably not. Taylor versus Valle, not sure. The midfield's gotten a bit murky as far as who's the preferred starting 3, even if McGregor is available. I think we know who the front 3 will be, particularly with Ida likely to be out injured. So, I think it's interesting that Aberdeen's probably the settled entity coming into this, whereas we've got more of the question marks on selection and availability. So I think that to a degree, because the manager's going to have to make a call. There's risk with these calls, right? We've talked about this. His pedigree hasn't always been the best in managing these issues with injured players. McGregor's not a spring chicken anymore, coming off of an Achilles injuries last season. First game back in a little while. He hasn't been out long, but as we all get older, you don't bounce back quite as fast. I just think some of the points that Gavin raised on, and were mentioned earlier on, kind of the ability to bounce back from a fitness perspective, playing twice, really intense games within a few days. We've got our own fitness issues potentially that could, be a factor in the game as well. So, are there any other than Duke? Is there anyone else latent that we know of, Gavin, as far as fitness or carrying injuries?
Yeah, Nisbet was back to full training, they said tomorrow. So, I mean, I don't think he'll start anyway, but he could be good to come off the bench. And yeah, Duke, I mean, I think the only question would be whether it's potentially Shaden Morris from the start and Keskinen to the left. But I still think he'll be an impact sub. He may even go with Clarkson back in ahead of Duke and push McGrath back out wide. So, but I think it'll be the same team, given what he said.
Interesting.
Alan.
Thank you. Alan? Yeah.
So you can't really underestimate, I don't think. You're going to really essentially have 2 days rest, right? Full days rest between last night and Saturday, where you'll be travelling down and
Yeah,
preparing for the game.
we've got a 3 hour journey, Alan. Unlike you guys,
I know, I know, I know. So you can't underestimate the impact of that, though. That's a significant impact for Aberdeen, I think. Especially, not only just that, you've got to think about the emotional energy as well as the physical energy that went into last night. Because the golden ticket at the end of that was 9 points clear in second place. That's just a great outcome for Aberdeen. But and they had to suffer a lot in the game in terms of defending in that second half, especially. They had to summon the energy to come from being pegged back to then go again to get a winner. And in any case, these games against the Rangers are always physical kind of games as well. The supporters are very emotional. So all of that factored in. I think it's a tough thing to do physically and mentally to recover fully for that game on a Saturday, a big cup game. For Celtic, I agree with James, but we've kind of got a few conundrums, and probably between ourselves. Gavin will talk about the midfield three, which is, as James said, murky. I would use stronger language, but there's only Schmeichel and Trusty have played the full 90 minutes over the last 3 games, right?
right?
We've made a total of 10 changes in the last 2 games. So there's been some good squad juggling without impacting on. Well, performances have been okay. There've been 2 comfortable wins where we've not really had to extend ourselves physically, actually. I mean, Motherwell was a tremendous amount of just passing the ball around at the back because we were 2-0 up and we don't need to try very hard. So in terms of conserving energy, there was a lot of that. Last night was about giving some genuine fringe players minutes. And not taking too many risks with the likes of Carter Vickers. He came off after 76 minutes. So I think there's some uncertainty there, left back being one. If Carter Vickers is enough to start 76 minutes, then, does that potentially mean one of Trusty, who's been excellent, by the way, and I had him as man of the match in Atalanta. Does he drop out? Does Scales drop out? So it's a nice problem to have. The one that worries me most is striker, because Ida's ankle took a right rap in that Motherwell game, a horrible tackle. And Kyogo, strikers are wise to him now. They hit him a lot off the ball on his shoulder because he's got a weak shoulder. So they barrel into him a lot off the ball, and he was getting buffeted around again last night. If something happens to him, because he's actually, we've been kind of relied on him. In fact, he played it's only his second 90 minutes of the season last night, and the first was the opening day of the season against Kilmarnock. So he's not played beyond the 80th minute in any game. So, and we're going to be relying on him on Saturday. So that'd be a real risk area, because if something happens to him, then really you're looking at Maeda. Now Maeda's a pretty good centre forward. In fact, I'd argue he's a better centre forward than he is a winger. But then you lose some of that. He would do a good job at pinning Devlin back, for example. Devlin would find it very hard to get up the pitch if he's got Maeda herring after him, as well. But there's a few doubts there. But I just feel, I guess, I try not to be partisan. I just feel that Celtic are used to this turnover. They're used to this cadence of big matches. The squad's generally well rested, with a few caveats, as James mentioned. And can Aberdeen go again? The same 11, the same energy, the same. I think they probably can for 50 minutes. Yeah, but then I think my feeling is that Celtic will just edge it in the latter stages, maybe.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if you told me, 2 weeks ago, or was it 2 weeks ago when we had it probably couldn't
Yes,
have, I couldn't, would have been more than happy with with what happened up until till now, and we've obviously got a league title to keep an eye on as well. So, obviously
Absolutely.
the treble is still something that we'd like to
Yeah.
to do, but
Brilliant.
I do wonder if it might be, as you kind of said, potentially a bridge too far, because we have to lose at some point, and this, as you said, I think absolutely that sounds like about right. If you play the same game as last time or whatever, we're tied and we're going into the last half hour. Another concern I had a little bit from the weekend, from the last game, was set pieces. We gave away a lot of corners to you guys. You mentioned it as well. When you guys did your wrap up about how much high XG you guys had from set pieces. I think before long we're going to concede a goal from a corner, and if we kind of keep doing what we're doing, then we're probably going to concede a few corners against you. Devlin's a good point, right? I don't know how much the fullbacks got into the game at Celtic Park. They weren't really a big factor, our fullbacks, and I do wonder if we'll be able to have them kind of influence the game the way they have been doing the other games. But yeah, we'll see. I think you guys Martin, you might be the man. Was it Jess 93 last time we beat you at Hampden?
Aye,
thinking,
I saw you beating us at Hampden a few times,
Yeah.
89 and so forth as well in the
1990,
semi-final.
of course.
Oh, and
Yeah.
Jess, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll to have him on the team again tomorrow, but I think we're for our Saturday. But yeah, we're looking forward to it anyway.
I think so, and just final thing from me there, obviously we've been talking about the energy that you guys have put out, but you also don't have any European games, so you can leave everything on the park at the weekend. We've got a very big game coming up at Leipzig, it'll be a very challenging game, albeit at home, at least there's no travel. And I would also, echo Alan's kind of concerns there up front. I really hope Adamida recovers okay, because I did fear for Kyogo a few times watching the game last night as well.
That's a Brendan Rodgers line you've dished out there, Martin.
I'll take that as a huge compliment. Thanks so much, Gavin. But Gavin, I would just like to.
Gavin asked about the fullbacks in the last game.
Oh, yeah.
Gavin, I don't know if you're aware, or you're aware of the packing concept. Forward passes.
Vaguely,
yeah. Out the game.
Yeah.
So I calculate all that for all Celtic games. So that's a good way of seeing to what extent your fullbacks were getting involved in forward play. So their packing scores were pretty average, especially Mackenzie's, and actually all of their packing scores were actually in providing forward passes. They only ever between them they received one pass each. That was a forward pass that broke the lines to any extent, one each.
Right.
So that suggests that they just weren't getting found at all in open play with forward passes.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, good data. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, never mind all this abuse about being called a nerd and all that. James is just jealous that you're pulling this stuff, from your vast knowledge. So well done, Alan. Why can't you be more like that, James?
There's a really dull spreadsheet behind this.
Gavin, given that you're in Boston, I know how seriously these trick-or-treaters take things if you don't answer the door, my friend, so we'll need to let you get back to that. But listen, thanks again, coming on. It's always a genuine pleasure having you on here. It really is. And as I say, I mentioned it before and I'll say it again, any football enthusiasts at all, do please go on to AFC 1903 to check Gavin's output, because it really is worth a look there. So we look forward to seeing you again in the future. I hope you enjoy the game, not too much as I say, but I hope you enjoy it. A gallant effort and all the rest of it. But as I say, I'll allow you to bask in the warm glow from last night's victory.
All right, perfect. Thanks, guys.
Just to thank everyone for tuning in, whether watching us or listening to us. Remember to hit those likes and subscribe, and look forward to next week. You can join us in the Thursday show. We'll be talking about the European match against Leipzig. And remember, of course, there'll be the show with Laura, James and Alan at the start of the week as well, looking ahead to that game. So thanks again.